There really is nothing like watching a Star Wars movie, man. Every time you sit down and that awesome text shows up that says a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and you feel that inner child growing up inside you and you get all excited, then BAM! I don't know if this was done on purpose, but pretty much every single time that happens, I like jump out of my seat a little bit. And come on, be honest, you do too. In preparation for the end of the saga, The Rise of the Skywalker, I'm going to be watching and reviewing all 6 Star Wars films. And I'm really excited for this because regardless of how bad the prequels were, regardless of how bad The Last Jedi was, regardless of all the hate surrounding George Lucas, Star Wars is such an iconic franchise that it is really a privilege for me to be able to watch all of them and to review them and hear your guys' thoughts on them. And we're kicking things off with The Phantom Menace, so let's get into it. I've seen this movie about maybe 4 or 5 times, and unfortunately the conclusion that I've come to is that it basically doesn't need to exist. There really is no tie-in that it has with the overall story. I mean, maybe if the way that they treated Anakin or the way they handled his character was a little more compelling, it would be more interesting and it would be more integral to the overall story arc of Anakin, because one could argue that Anakin is actually the main character of the franchise. But as it stands, we just really didn't need this movie for the overall story. We just didn't need it. I'm honestly glad that I was too young to experience the tragic letdown of the story. Can you imagine being old enough to have seen the original Star Wars in 1977 when we were at that tender age of like 12 or 13, and then see all the amazing movies that come after that, and then have your hopes build up for over 15 years only to have them dashed to the side like a child whose parents forgot to pick them up from kindergarten? Can you imagine being that person who is waiting like a child Christmas Day, and then during the opening crawl, one of the first lines they read is, "The taxation of trade routes to outlying star systems is in dispute." And actually, the entire opening crawl is just about trade disputes. I mean, how could anyone have thought that was a gripping premise, especially after waiting so long for this movie? A movie like this has to open up with a crazy fight scene. It just has to. How can you have an opening about a ship wanting to dock at a station and 2 Jedi just talking about the discussions that they need to have? I mean, at least if you're not going to have some kind of fight scene, make it visually stunning like you did with The Force Awakens. I mean, that wasn't a pedal to the metal opening, but at least you were just gripped with the incredible visuals that were being presented. The acting. The acting, even by some actors who are great. Well, now they're great. I honestly am not entirely sure of their reputation at the time of the filming. I'm pretty sure that Ewan McGregor had already done Train Spotting. Maybe. I'm going to fact check myself on that one. But if he had, then he took several notches down with this one. But Master Yoda said I should be mindful of the future. I just love how he does this like little rise to the top when he says mindful. Like he couldn't have just said something that, you know, the way normal people talk, like, but Master Yoda said I should be mindful of the future. Master Yoda said I should be mindful of the future. So gas is thrown into this room, and you know these vaguely racist alien creatures think that the Jedi should be dead by now. They must be dead by now. Do you have any idea who Jedi are? I mean, yeah, to be fair, he says that he's never encountered a Jedi before, but surely they've heard of them. Like, surely their reputation kind of precedes them, as it were. Like, surely you don't think that Jedi are going to be dead after a few seconds of being exposed to gas. So then they send droidekas, an admittedly much more effective strategy, and then the Jedi fight them off and they're like, oh, we can't handle this, so they just go, psst. Whoa, Jedi have super speed now? Why hasn't this been employed in more of the movies? A little while later, the vaguely racist aliens try to contact one of the greatest characters in the franchise, Miss Stoneface herself, Queen Amidala. This character kind of reminds me of those really creepy, really old cartoons where the animation is completely stagnant, but only the mouth is moving. For die-hard Pixar fans, you might have seen a short that was on the Incredibles DVD where it's Mr. Incredible and Frozone. I can't believe I had a problem just now trying to remember their names. And they're doing like some kind of, it's like an old style cartoon from like the 60s or whatever, and it's just that. The animation is almost completely stagnant and just their mouths are moving. Just the mouths. And that's what Queen Amidala reminds me of. Does this woman have any kind of bodily functions at all? I mean, all she does is like sit up on the throne with her arms like this. Does she have any kind of discomfort? Do her knees ever hurt? Does she ever have to stand and stretch? Does she ever need to eat? Or does she need to drink water? Does she have someone do that for her? Does she ever have to use the bathroom? And when she does she say, I must use the facilities, and don't wait up, it's a toozy. After that, we get introduced to probably the most hated character of the entire franchise, Jar Jar Binks. In a tragic example of life imitating art, the actor who played Jar Jar Binks was so harassed and bullied because of this character that he played that he tried to commit suicide. He wasn't even suicidal, he tried to commit suicide. Thankfully, he had a bit of an awakening because he was standing on a bridge and he was going to jump off, and a gust of wind came by and he grabbed onto the pole, and to him that meant that I still care about my life. It's really sad. So, out of respect for the actor, I'm not going to say anything critical about Jar Jar from here on out till I finish all the rest of the movie reviews. Jar Jar then leads the Jedi into the Gungan city, and man, Jar Jar's got some hops. I mean, that guy was going up like 20 feet. The Gungan city is breathtakingly gorgeous. I love the design of it. I love how they decided to make all the rooms kind of like bulbous, if you will, and how all you got to do to get in is just like slip through one of those like cell type sheets things. It's really cool design. It's really pretty. Unfortunately, the scene that follows is one of the clearest depictions of the main flaws of this movie. It's boring. The actors could have at least livened up the dialogue a little bit, but they don't even do that. I mean, granted, they weren't given very good dialogue to begin with, but their delivery is just so wooden, and it's just so lifeless that you can't really get behind it. In fact, the biggest point of intrigue at this point of the movie is that Jar Jar was banished, and like that's the only thing we have to hang on to, like our investment in why was he banished. But it's not really that interesting because we don't know anything about Jar Jar. There's no particular engagement in his character. So what are we invested in? What are we invested in at this particular point? And Lucas probably knew this because later when they're leaving the ship, it's almost as if he was like, oh yeah, we got to entertain the audience somehow. Oh, right. These families are bringing their like 9-year-old kids. Let's just throw in a giant old fish into the mix. We then make our way back to the Queen. And there's a curious shot where she's staring out the window and there are like these light bulbs or something around her dress. Can anyone explain that to me? It doesn't seem very practical. The Jedi then attack and save everybody. And this is one of the first instances in the movie, and there are going to be more, of the Jedi using the Force to neutralize the enemy. And it's like, why don't you do this all the time? And I suppose the answer, the quick and easy answer, is that it would make it all the more boring, because then you would take the lightsabers out of the equation. Although maybe this is a legitimate answer, and one that I'm not exactly sure of, so please let me know in the comments. Do Jedi get tired after using the Force for a while? Like, is it sort of like an energy bar and it just slowly depletes the more that they use it? I love when Qui-Gon turns to the Queen and he's like, my feelings tell me they will destroy you. As if he like remembered some item on a grocery list and just tells her to write it down. The introduction of R2-D2 is quite effective and it's quite fun, even though it is still a little bit unfair in the sense that R2 didn't save the ship by his skill. He was saved by pure luck. He wasn't just blown away like the rest of those poor droids. But it is a good demonstration of his resourcefulness and his fearlessness, which is one of the two prime characteristics of his character. So kudos to Lucas for at least incorporating that. But this scene is also another demonstration of why this movie fails. The plot points are just so thought out and sequential. It's like, oh, I guess we need to land. Oh, the hyperdrive is leaking. Okay, let's land over here on Tatooine. It's just so like A, B, C, boom, boom, boom. It's just lazy writing. It's just chess piece storytelling. Ultimately just not very compelling. Then at least we get the introduction of Darth Maul, one of the coolest villains of all time. I mean, granted, if you were to do some kind of debate between, who's better, Darth Maul or Darth Vader, obviously Darth Vader wins by a milestone, but he is more interesting. Personally, I don't think he's cooler. You don't ever see Darth Maul flipping around like a gymnast with a double-edged lightsaber, do ya? R2-D2 comes back to the Queen, and they say that this is the droid that saved the ship or saved the day or whatever. And the Queen smiled. Whoa, okay. Don't overexert yourself here, Queen. I mean, we don't want you to ruin your facial muscles. Can we get like a makeup person in here? Come on. They land on Tatooine, and then they meet the Chosen One, the main character of the entire franchise, Anakin himself, and one of the worst child actors of all time. This is another guy I kind of feel bad for criticizing because the poor kid was just ruthlessly harassed and bullied by his jealous classmates. I mean, he was only like 9 or 10 at the time of filming. But considering that he is the centerpiece by which the entire story revolves, I have to rib him a little bit. This kid has the acting prowess of your average church Christmas pageant child ministry performer. And his inherent cuteness only makes it all the more annoying. Of course, like I said before, any actor that has trouble delivering this dialogue can be almost entirely blamed on Lucas for it being so on the nose and ultimately boring. But he had to have received just a little bit more direction. You gotta love the introduction of C-3PO, if anything, for the delightfully legendary and charming voice of Anthony Daniels. It's such a legendary voice, it'll never get old. The one little nitpicky part of this movie that really bothers me is that they decided to give Darth Maul dialogue. Why did you decide to give this Force of Death dialogue? He doesn't need to say anything. The movie would have been 1% better if he had just said nothing the entire time and let his actions do all the talking. So later on, they're talking about pod racing and how Anakin is the only human being alive who can do it. And quick question, how did he discover that? How did a 9-year-old kid just stumble into something as crazy as pod racing? Like, was he just hanging around some day when he was like 6? Because I guess he discovered it, at the very earliest, he discovered it like a year ago. So when he was like 8 or something, to just like hop into a pod race, he's like, "Oh, this looks fun." Was it just like a sort of glove on hand situation? He's like, "Oh, this will be fun, you know, just to take a little joy." Oh, watch out for the Tusken Raiders. So, hey, it's sort of explained, I guess, in the sense that Watto makes him do it to make him money. But then, how did Watto know? And why would Watto trust a slave boy to make him any kind of revenue outside of the tasks that he does for him every day? Qui-Gon then talks to Anakin's mom and says that he has special powers, but that he is strong with the Force. So which one is it? Are Jedi born with power, or is it something that they can learn? I prefer the latter. So then Qui-Gon asks his mom to explain like where Anakin came from, like who's the father, and she says, "Oh, there is no father." Which you think like, wow, I guess that means she got raped, which is obviously tragic and really heavy-handed, but at the same time gives it some good weight to the script, because it's like, wow, Anakin really did come from nothing, and he really is the chosen one. Like, it's a great story. But then she says, she made it seem like he's like a Christ figure. Like, she just woke up one day and she's like, "Oh, I'm pregnant." Is the mom implying that there literally is no father, that he just kind of materialized in her womb? Pretty weird point. I would like some clarity on that. Qui-Gon is just a little shady in this movie. I mean, you can't really, you can't deny it. He does things behind the Queen's back, you know, saying like, "The Queen doesn't have to know." He manipulates the dice to his own advantage, which is like a blatant example of cheating. And he also lies to Anakin about the motivation of getting his blood, which he did without his consent. Doesn't exactly seem like the Jedi way to me. The pod race scene is pretty sweet. There's no denying that. Pretty good CGI, you know, pretty good practical effects, pretty good build-up, great music, great camera work, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. If only they had put as much effort into the dialogue and story as they had put into this pod race. This is why I believe that Lucas is a better producer than anything else. He's better at creation than he is at directing and or writing. His imagination is intense and truly unique and special, a once-in-a-generation imagination. He's able to create incredible worlds that are wholly convincing, and incredible characters and universes. It's just abundantly clear in this movie that his heart was far more into creating this pod race, creating a fictional sport, than it was into making a good story. I just find that kind of amusing. This is the kind of criticism that can only come from watching this movie for many, many years. But there's the scene where Anakin's pod flies by and his little 9-year-old friend says like, "Yay, Annie," and jumps. And it is the most forced, unenthusiastic jump I've ever seen. And then later, after Anakin wins the race, his friend tries to like high five the little 9-year-old alien, and they totally mess it up. It's like when you're saying goodbye to like that friend slash acquaintance, you're not exactly sure if they're a friend or an acquaintance, like somewhere in between, and you like go out to shake their hand, but they put like a fist bump up, and so you're locked in this awkward like 3-second negotiation of what are we gonna do here. I just can't believe that Lucas decided that was the shot that they were gonna use for the film. So Anakin finally takes the plunge, and he's gonna go off to be a Jedi Knight, but not before saying goodbye to his mom. He runs up to her and he's like, "I can't go. I just can't do it." Yeah, real convincing delivery there, my dude. Plus, isn't this all you've ever wanted? I mean, I can understand if you're like looking back to your mom and, you know, you get like a little teary-eyed, misty-eyed or whatever, or even if you go back and give her a hug, but to say that you can't do it, that's totally unconvincing. Then Darth Maul attacks. Qui-Gon tells Anakin to drop, which honestly, if it would have been me as a 9-year-old, I'd been like, why? End of movie. My head gets decapitated by Darth Maul. Whoops. So in the preliminary fight between Qui-Gon and Darth Maul, George Lucas wanted it to be kind of like a teaser fight, which I think was actually a pretty good decision. There's a lot of sand flying everywhere, and like the camera isn't really centered on one particular character. You just hear like whooshing and what have you, and it's like a little teaser. So I thought that was actually a pretty good idea. Now we arrive in Coruscant, and let's be honest, it's basically what Mars is going to look like in 100 years if Elon Musk is successful. Basically, for the next 20 minutes or so, it's just this pseudo-political dialogue about trade routes and federations and delegates. Can you imagine an 8-year-old trying to sit through this? It's at least accessible for adults. Like, it's accessible for someone who's not at all politically inclined like myself, but it's just not very interesting. We already know, or at least we suspect, that Palatine is the villain here, so there isn't really much mystery at all. So then later on we get to a discussion about midichlorians, and let's talk about midichlorians for a second. I've never really thought too much of it, honestly. Like, it didn't really bother me, you know, like it does for most hardcore Star Wars fans, but I can see where the objection comes in. If you were to ask me, okay, which do you prefer? A bunch of little microbacteria that basically dictate how good of a Jedi you're going to be, or an eternally mysterious energy that you have to tap in through years of arduous training and sacrifice, I'd probably go with this one. Introducing midichlorians into the universe almost makes it seem like an IQ, like it's just something that you are born with, and if your IQ isn't high enough, then, well, I guess you're destined to be like a janitor on the Death Star or whatever. You're not really destined for greatness. But if you make it more so like a faith-based thing, like something that you can learn and adapt to, then it's much more accessible to everyone, and it really blows the door open for a lot of great stories. So yeah, I'm not really sure. I guess Lucas just wanted it to be an explanation for the Force, but it doesn't really work, especially later in Episode 3 when Yoda says that the Force is eternally mysterious. So Anakin is then brought before the Council to test his abilities to see if he really is the Chosen One. And the test that they use is like some grade school hologram device. I'm not saying it's not entirely legitimate, because obviously, if you don't have the Force at all, you really can't tell what's happening. But there are just so many more intense and far cooler ways of testing someone's ability. You think that this kid is the one who's going to bring balance to the Force. You think that he's the one who's going to take down the Jedi. Can't you, throw him into a giant pit full of snakes and fire or something? Like, you have to use a little hologram with a ship on there? Lucas is not even at his worst when he's trying to write plot points. He's actually at his worst when he's trying to write scenes with any kind of emotion at all. There's a scene on Naboo where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are standing by each other, and Obi-Wan is being all apologetic about the way he's acted and stuff, and Qui-Gon says, "You are far wiser than me. I perceive that you will someday become a great Jedi Knight." No one talks that explicitly. No one talks that on the nose, man. It just sucks any of the potential emotion out of the entire thing. Everyone goes to the Gungan King for help so that they will create some kind of diversion so the Jedi and company can go and save the Queen. Portman's delivery during this line is just how is someone as talented as you think that this is a good way of delivering this line? "No, I beg you to help us." Is this Invasion of the Body Snatchers or something? Do you want them to help you, or do you want them to sing you a lullaby to go to sleep? The weird thing about this movie is that the acting is so wooden and so robotic that when characters actually display emotions, it kind of throws you off a little. The Gungan King is "Yeah, I'm going to help you, and here's how we say yes in our culture." You're like, "Oh, well, okay, please don't get any of your spit on me." But then Natalie Portman is she does some kind of smile, and I remember just watching it, I'm like, oh yeah, you are human. It's almost like we've reached the uncanny valley. The uncanny valley is what makes things creepy, because your brain perceives it as being just a little off from normal. That's what makes things creepy. And so when Natalie Portman actually has a reaction to something, like a human emotion, you're just a little thrown off. Then the Gungan King is like, "Jar Jar, you did a thing. You brought Jedi to us, so we're going to make you a general." What? The shot of the Gungans going to meet the droids on that valley is actually pretty cool. The camera stays stationary, there's a lot of fog, you can hear some kind of horn, blowing, and then they slowly ride out. They slowly come into the camera view. That was pretty cool. It would have been even cooler if the shot had stayed on there for a bit longer. The shot of the droids coming over the hill was pretty cool as well, and I liked the little touch of having those tiny CGI animals run out of the way. Again, would have been even cooler if it had lasted a bit longer. The Jedi start the invasion of the temple, and Qui-Gon tells Anakin to go find some place safe to hide. You have the Chosen One, the kid that you deliberately disobeyed the Jedi Council for, and you tell him to go find a safe place? What kind of advice is this? So then we cut back to the Gungans on the field, and Jar Jar trying to act like a general is just hilarious. The only characteristic he's displayed up until this point is being a bumbling buffoon. And now he turns to these Gungans that are getting a little unsteady about these massive droid ships coming toward him. He's like, "Steady, steady." If I had been one of the soldiers, that I would have been like, "Who are you?" So then all the droids charge, and the captain's like, "Ouch time." Oh. Aha! Here's a part of the film that I've been looking forward to, the fight with Darth Maul. This is the best part of the movie. Purely from a fanboy standpoint, of course, but it's pretty awesome, you gotta admit. Especially the introduction of him, the gate opens up and the, John Williams' brilliant score is bum bum, Darth Maul! And he's all, standing there just basically meditating, waiting for him to come in. Then he looks up and he's like, "That's right. I'm Darth Maul." Now, it was a pretty good decision to have all the foot soldiers run away in fear, and for the Jedi to be like, "We'll handle this." But it would have been even cooler if they had all just immediately shot at him, and he would have just taken out his double-sided blade and just blocked all of them and just kept staring them dead in the eyes, and then they would have gone away. That would have been pretty sweet. Or if he hadn't even taken out his saber, they all shot at him, and he just like force stopped all their shots, and then like made them fall to the ground or something. I don't know. That would have made him even more intimidating. I like all three ending sequences. You know, the battle, the battle on Naboo, the ship fights up in the sky, and the fight with Darth Maul, of course. I just don't exactly like how they're all interspliced together. Maybe two storylines at once, you know, kind of like a Christopher Nolan type thing. But three, like it just eventually the drama and the investment of each particular one just gets a little bit diluted. I like how the score is very minimal, and the only thing that you hear in the final seconds before, oops, spoiler alert, Qui-Gon dies, is Darth Maul's theme, so to speak, like the like that sort of random kind of like chanting tribe type vocalizations are really scary and really intimidating, and they're perfect for that like devil incarnate type character of Darth Maul. And Qui-Gon's death was quite unexpected, so that was a pretty good dramatic move. Obi-Wan versus Darth Maul is the peak of the movie. That's when it's absolutely reached the top of drama, because you can see just the rage and the fury in Obi-Wan's face as he's behind that red shield or whatever it is. And I know that a lot of people are going to be like, oh, well, Jedi shouldn't feel anger, they shouldn't feel emotions. And it's like, well, they're still human, you know, they're still learning. Obi-Wan wasn't a master at that point, so for him to feel anger over the fact that his beloved master has been sliced down is pretty legit. The laser opens and he just busts out of there, and him and Darth Maul just throw down. There's lightsabers flying everywhere. The sound design is awesome. Ray Park, who plays Darth Maul, does an amazing job of just flipping all over the place, and it just really feels very visceral. It feels like they really want to kill each other. So then Darth Maul gets the upper hand, and Obi-Wan is hanging off from that whatever it is. But this is where the fight becomes silly again, because Darth Maul is just like swinging his lightsaber back and forth instead of doing something that would make sense, you know, like force pushing him down, or maybe trying to like, you know, just reach down and like poke his fingers with his lightsaber, you know, cutting them off, making him fall. He's just like, nope, like I'm just gonna try to. Well, I don't know. What was he trying to do? And literally 2 full seconds elapses from Obi-Wan force jumping himself up, grabbing Qui-Gon's lightsaber, and turning Darth Maul into a little fun-sized Sith. How could Darth Maul not defend himself against this? How could he not see it coming? And even if he didn't see it coming, his head literally traces Obi-Wan as he flips over him. One final gripe, it just bothers me how Yoda never really agrees with the rest of the council, or Obi-Wan especially, about training Anakin. I mean, don't you think after like 850 odd years of existence that Yoda would at least have some kind of sense that Anakin was the chosen one, that he is the one who's going to bring balance to the Force? The fact that he provides resistance every single step of the way is just kind of annoying. The Phantom Menace certainly has its good moments. It has the pod race, it has the fight, it has very occasional moments of interesting characters and, you know, little funny, tiny little funny moments here and there, but it hardly redeems the terrible dialogue, the even worse acting, and just the unfortunately non-essential story. And I'm going to give this one a 5.5 out of 10. What are your thoughts on The Phantom Menace? I'm eager to hear them. Whatever they are, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next cinematic adventure.